Its only purpose is to impose discipline on all the nations to accept a trading system, and that discipline should be under the control of all the nations that participate on a one-vote, one-nation basis. Full stop. That's dilution of sovereignty. The exact technical mechanisms, legal mechanisms, I would rather avoid because they are too technical.
Thank you. If you can, explain to me why people in whom we have had a great deal of confidence over the years. I started out with President Carter, President Reagan, President Bush, and now President Clinton, and all of their key advisors. I mean, that's a pretty impressive list of people who think this is a good proposition for the world, and particularly America. How do you explain what I assume you think is the wrong opinion by all those individuals that I just mentioned?
Senator, the Uruguay round, the negotiations for the Uruguay round started 8 years ago. The world has changed totally. GATT, of course, started after War 49, I think it was. The world has changed totally. Now, what the reasons which the chairman mentioned we haven't focused on, I think you did as well, Senator, which is the alternatives. And I think there was other conversation, are the alternatives. The alternatives are not just closing the market, becoming protectionist. The alternatives are not saying we are now going into protection and we're going to isolate ourselves from the world, each one of them. The alternative is to have regional trading blocks which have similar economies, so we're not trying to make our labor forces compete with people whose labor costs 2% of theirs, and thereby destroying them, but reducing their salaries and eliminating their jobs, but having negotiated bilateral agreements between trading blocks so that each region, each nation, imports those products that it needs, not those products that destroy its jobs. The regions we are talking about now, NAFTA or Europe, are vast areas. We've never experienced trading blocks of these sizes, free trade regions. Nobody thought when these negotiations started that communism would collapse before the negotiations were signed, that China and Vietnam and all the Soviet nations would be part of it, and all the other countries were blocked with their socialist ideas. It's all happened. You've had a massive, total, historic shift, and you're on the same track as though it never existed, and you're being told to sign it now, because if you read the document, it's going to be too late. I mean, this is the greatest, as Senator Moynihan said, the most important piece of legislation. How can there be anything more important than creating a free trade area, not with Mexico and Canada, which is already important, but creating a free trade area with China and India and Vietnam and Bangladesh and all the others, 4 billion new people? All this has suddenly happened, and the negotiations are going on as though nothing has occurred. That is why, Senator, people who were entirely reputable and wise were for global free trade before, as I was, but who have to open their eyes to reality today and say what was global free trade in those days is regional free trade today.
My last question has to do with the key statement that you made in your opening statement, and that is regard to potential massive unemployment in the United States that I think has not been looked at, Mr. Chairman, as much as we should. And I would like to ask this question in the context of a few lessons in history. You are a citizen of Great Britain. Certainly, I think that we would recognize that those of us who have done some study of history would recognize that the situation of the United States of America, once a colony of Great Britain, and Great Britain itself are extensively different because over the years Great Britain had depended upon its vast fleet, its countries that it controlled around the world, and there was the British Empire, so to speak. That was never essentially the case with America, because we were more self-sufficient, had more natural resources, obviously, than you did. But certainly, I think that we ought to at least take a look at what I think has been a demise, to a large extent, of the working class of people that once had that small island over there, a very bustling economic smokestack industries that are now essentially gone. It brings me to a question that I think will give you an opportunity to expound a little bit more on what you said with regard to massive employment. I certainly am profoundly troubled with the economists' view of low-wage and low-skilled workers as, somewhat disposable. I remember in America where hard work would earn a decent day's wage. Today, hard work and good will do not seem to go as far as they once did. It is interesting that this same Congress passed a massive crime bill, and the next Congress will consider welfare reform. It is often said that there are a few of our local social ills that would not be solved with good jobs. Do you agree with that? What will the GATT agreement do to those families barely getting on by both mom and dad working full-time in relatively low-skilled jobs or medium-skilled jobs that I suspect will be even a more effect on what we generally refer to as middle America? Aren't they at grave risk here?
Well, Senator, when I was young, I was taught, as we all were, that if we managed to create extraordinary material prosperity, we would solve our problems. And we were brought up in the belief that there was an inevitability of progress. Progress of wealth, progress of stability, progress of civilization. Well, during the last 50 years, so since I've been more or less an adult, we've had the greatest period of economic prosperity, economic growth in history. We have succeeded beyond our wildest dreams. The economy of the United States has soared in real terms 4 or 5 times up. And throughout the Western world, in England a bit less, but still fantastic, in France just as much. And what has happened? Have we solved our problems? Are our towns more stable? Are our families more stable? Is there less crime? Less people in prisons? Less people in... Are there more people in permanent and noble employment? What have we done? We have profoundly destabilized our communities. We have done everything that was wrong in social terms. We've deracinated, we've uprooted people from the countrysides. We've shoved them into towns. We haven't given them jobs. We've created ghettos and underclasses. We've increased crime and drug addiction and family breakdown. All this in a period of maximum prosperity. Why? Because we were only interested in economic indices. We forgot that the purpose of the economy is not just to improve the index. It is to improve prosperity along with social stability and social contentment. And GATT is typical of the economic instrument whose purpose is to increase corporate profits, whose purpose is to increase gross national activity, and whose result will be the destruction of the stability of our society, a continued breakdown in family life, a continued increase in crime, impoverishment, and all the other ills that we are now suffering.
Sir James Goldsmith, I thank you very, very much. Mr. Chairman, I would hope and congratulate you once again for having these hearings, because these are some of the concerns so adequately expressed by Sir James Goldsmith and others that you had before the committee that I'm not sure that American people fully understand. And I think that the American people had better have a fuller understanding than they do now